And we're on. All right. Good evening, everyone. With a quorum of members present and the posted time having arrived, I will call the Finance Committee for Tuesday, August 8th, 2023 to order. The first item on our agenda is the minutes of our previous meeting from 7:25, copies of which are in the packets. Did anyone note any corrections they wanted for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve them. Motion from Denny. Is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. Minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action on reserving space in the Sears parking ramp for the Imaginarium. And let me switch back and forth to the packet. Who has that item?
Well, so we, Liz Brodick and I had met with the staff from the Imaginarium. I was on vacation last week, and I know an email came through last week while I was on vacation saying, hey, would you be able to, give us some more information on what we should ask for, which, of course, I didn't respond to because I was on vacation. So I'm wondering if perhaps we should delay this for a future meeting.
We could hold it for the next one,
Yeah.
because I think we also probably need to talk with engineering and DPW about if we're going to reserve parking, right? So
Right.
parking is their jam. So, yeah, we can certainly hold it for next time if it's not quite ready. There's not a rush. They're not
Yeah.
opening until October.
Correct.
So if everyone's
Okay.
amenable to that, we'll hold number 2 for next time. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action regarding ARPA funding requests and related budget modification. This one is carried over from our last meeting, and the project that we had ranked was the 700 Grand Avenue Storm reroute, which was a sizable amount. You'll see that Cody brought us the scoring sheet today, and it looks like between us all, it scored 61, which is average. We've sent stuff forward that scored in that area before. What are your thoughts on this one, committee? This pretty much uses up the rest of the money, I think, if we're going to move this one ahead.
1.8 million, and this was a $1 million, I think, request.
Right, so we'd have about 800,000 left for whatever other purpose, but this would pretty much knock out the lion's share. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you wouldn't have to make a decision tonight. You could kick it down the road a little bit longer. if you want.
Well, this particular project is still waiting for tax credits, and that application window's a long way off yet. So, Sarah?
I guess, can we see any other project coming down the line or proposals coming down the line that any department heads or, anything from the water, our water utility that may be coming up that we could use these funds for instead?
Well, that's it. And we have half a dozen projects that we put a pin in, waiting to see what else
Right.
came through as well. And we've not revisited that list either.
Mm-hmm.
We did talk, that a couple of things depending, this is reliant, and Randy, has feelings on this too, but it's reliant on they're going to get their tax credits and that they'll be able to cash flow, obviously, with the construction costs being what they are. These projects are becoming a bigger and bigger struggle. You do have TID districts getting ready to close that you could use that one-time low-income housing.
Yes, you could recapture that extra
Right.
year of increment.
And then also we had talked about the fact that, TID 8, there might be a way to do some boundary amendments that would allow us to get in within the half-mile boundary of TID 8. And, I know Tom Killian had expressed that he didn't like city hall specials, which, when we do those kind of things, but it does accomplish the task with another revenue source. So
Right.
those would be the other, in my mind, some of the other options that would be available to you.
Well, I think we also should be cautious with what we let people call a city hall special, because realistically, when you're using tax increment funding to allow a tax credit project to take flight, it's an atypical use first, because that project does not pay property tax at 100%. It pays it at a rate statutorily established at something more like 30%. So your return on investment is way longer and way less. But If that is something that the community and the council wishes to prioritize, that is absolutely one way of getting that work done, and then spreading the cost out without taking on additional municipal debt, whereby you would be, bonding for it, or using up the rest of the ARPA funding. I mean, there's,
Or you could do a combination thereof.
right, I mean, you could split it up too. So, Randy, do you have ideas?
Oh, I've got a ton of ideas. Thank you.
I am ready for your ideas.
Just a couple things I want to clear up on all of this. As was stated earlier, the project, in order to go forward as proposed, would require low-income tax credits. We won't know about that until likely sometime in early spring next year. The way that we would propose this project and working with Public Works is that this project wouldn't go forward unless those tax credits are awarded to the project. So they wouldn't just be, we wouldn't just be moving forward with the project irregardless. And also it's important to consider, if we're not going to use the ARPA funds, Mary Ann had some suggestions for using TIF funds and different things like that. But typically we're trying to use those funds in order to fund a project that's going to somehow pay us back. Low-income tax credits, affordable housing projects don't have a great payback. And especially we'd be using something that's going to be outside of the actual TID district. So it's really just going to be awarding money to a project.
Right.
Considering the source and purpose for these ARPA funds, it seems that this would be the best use of these funds if we're going to truly prioritize affordable housing within the city.
Yeah, and they
So-
were looking in the ARPA directive originally for us to find a way to, not only offset the effects of COVID, but make public-facing visible impacts in low-income areas. And, hence the low-income housing and water initiatives that we have, tossed out. So, I guess it's up to the committee. There's also a spend-down requirement on ARPA, so we can't wait forever. But the other thing is if, let's just say we were to use ARPA funding towards this project, if the tax credit award doesn't come until the spring of 2024, it seems that the soonest that the rerouting of the pipe would begin is at least then, and maybe after, maybe that summer. We wouldn't be delivering that housing until the following year, probably, with its size and everything. So, I think we just have to be mindful of, what was our spend down deadline? It's in '24, right?
You just have to have the funds committed by December 31st of 2024. You have till 2026.
Okay, and so if we found that that project hit a snag and say for a second year in a row it didn't get its tax credits, it can't take flight, we would still have some limited amount of time probably to reallocate that ARPA money, or?
Right. How are we funding the gap?
No, that's the other point on this. That's still part of the discussion as well. There's really two different funding sources
Right.
that we need for this project. First is for this infrastructure portion, and second of all, if you remember back to their proposal, they still had a significant gap. I want to say it was about 1.5, 1.75.
That was my recollection.
And that's what we're really, when we were talking about tax increment financing, using the one-year affordable housing, once you close a tax increment district, using that extension
be enough
to
for
create
all
some
of
funding.
There would be
We're all trying to find ways to make housing more affordable, and unfortunately, it comes down to funding. And it requires getting really creative with funding, unfortunately.
Well, and that's what Mary Ann was just saying, is that if we were to wait for a TID district to close, which is imminent here, and then reclaim the extra year of increment, and we can specifically, when that happens, you can use that anywhere in town. You don't have to just use it in the confines of the closed area. And you can use that to mitigate blight and facilitate projects like this. It's her feeling that if we use that method, there would be enough of that reclaimed increment to do both things, the sewer pipe and the gap, without diverting ARPA to this particular effort. So let's go Sarah and then Carol.
So I guess I would, since this isn't like an immediate need, like for approval, I'd love to come back and revisit the stuff we put back on the back burner. Maybe rank them, and say this is how we'd like to tackle them if we have funds left. Because if there's nothing new coming from department heads, that's sort of what we have left for the 1.8, you said?
Right, and PFAS. That would be
Right.
the other thing if you, had wanted to.
Right, I mean, if we decided we wanted to divert all of the rest of it to the PFAS project, there's that. But there's really no harm in us taking a public-facing look at the projects that we held up on, in addition to this one. And we may not want to do any of those. We may just, go
Yeah.
forward with some PFAS assistance. Or we may pull some projects off the list now that we're kind of to the end of the line. And, I mean, what do you guys think about that? Let's hear, Carol had her hand up first. Let's go with Carol and then Doug.
Thank you. I would agree with that. Just one question. Can you remind me if is the whole building supposed to be intended to be affordable housing?
Correct,
Or,
yep.
I mean, is it, okay.
All of it,
I
yeah.
just couldn't remember.
Yep, the entire project at 700 grand is, what they're looking to do is 100% affordable housing, and that scales up and down from 30, 60, 80% of median
Okay.
incomes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Doug?
Well, I guess it sounded like a motion from Alder Watson to postpone this and look at them in total context at our next meeting. I would second that.
Okay. And I don't know if we even need to necessarily take a motion and vote. You guys can agree by consensus that you want to hold action on this and then bring back the entire list that's been kind of sitting in a holding pattern next time if you want. Okay, if everybody's agreeable. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would concur also, but I'd also like to see of the projects that we've funded, what we've actually spent. And
Sure.
if there's any unclaimed funds there, because I know a couple of them had some grants and other funding on the back end.
Sure.
So there might be. there
Right,
might
so
be
if there's stuff that we've allocated that didn't need it all.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
important too.
Yeah, so
Agreed.
I'd like to see an accounting of that also.
Sure. Sarah?
Well, and I'd also like maybe, the proposals that we have looked at, if there's alternative fund sourcing that may change, because I know like we ranked, what is it, the funding options chunk. Is there any change or movement since those
Okay.
projects have been
That's
proposed?
true, because if no new sources have revealed themselves, I mean, that score might change if that happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. Well, let's do that. Let's hold on that action on that ARPA request under item number 3.
And then, Chair,
Go ahead.
can I just ask too, like, just a little more clarification too on maybe the total cost of the PFAS? Like, would it take the whole thing? Is it going to go to changing out that medium, or is it going to go help pay for our new
I think we already allocated funds to change the resin.
Right.
So there's that, but the rest of the solution too,
Just
I
to
think
offset
it
some
might
of
not
that.
be a bad idea to get a little recap of what our unfunded expected costs are. I mean, I know we were looking at some forgivable loans and things, but, is there any of that can't be covered by those other sources that we may need to pay attention to? I think that would be important for next time. Okay? If we're all in agreement, we'll just not act on item 3 and we'll bring it back in a broader form next month. Okay? That brings us to item 4, discussion and possible action regarding the proposed early hire of public work staff due to retirements in the next 6 months and related budget modifications and implications. We've seen this request from other departments as well. It gives them some time to get people on board and trained before the mentors leave, which is super helpful. And our Goodreader app doesn't work yet, so I can't toggle between the packet and the agenda, but
There's nothing in the packet.
does anybody have any questions
I think
for either
Dustin.
Mary Ann or the Public Works Director or Dustin on this? I mean, this is pretty straightforward because we've seen it. When we offered an incentive for early retirement notice, people have been willing to offer that, which is helpful to the organization in terms of getting people trained.
Dustin, how many positions did you have?
We have 2 operator positions that are both going to be leaving us in January.
Okay, Sarah?
So I guess since there isn't anything in the packet, is there any cost or budget modification that we're going to be,
How much do we need?
yeah?
I don't have any numbers from Mary Ann on that, like what we have from our savings as far as vacancies. I know we've had vacancies all year. We only got 1 summer helper and we were asking for 8, and then we've had a couple vacancies. We currently have 2 vacancies in the department right now.
Right?
Yeah.
You've been short on mechanics too and stuff, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I think the conversation that we had surrounding the police department, and we included this at that last meeting, was, while we've had savings, and I think there were, a number of savings, we had actually documentation in the packet the last time, but we also had assumed that we were going to have vacancies when we calculated the budget. If you recall, we had been generating about $1 million profit on an annual basis prior to creating the 2023 budget. And we looked at some of those vacancies, a lot of it was being generated by vacancies that were being held open. And so we said, do we want to levy for that whole thing? Or do we want to assume a small amount of vacancies? So we had said 3 vacancies during the year. That's what we budgeted for. So we assumed that we would have 3 vacancies through the year. And so when we look at, okay, we've had vacancies, can we afford to fill these positions early, knowing that we already assumed we would have those 3 vacancies? And it was a relatively small dollar amount when we looked at, from a budgetary standpoint, with the police department too, because there would be the vacancy in the police chief and the fire chief. Well, he's staying through the year, aren't you? Okay, so not with the fire chief. And that we didn't know, well, what vacancies will be occurring, through the balance of the year.
Sure. So we're not
we
sitting on
didn't really-
as much money as we might think.
Right.
Okay, okay, so that would be something that we would need to do a little bit of analysis on. Do you want us to act on it tonight, or should we wait until we shake out those numbers? I mean,
When
if
were you,
it's-
and I had that for the last meeting, sorry. So, like I said.
I guess I was hoping to start advertising probably late August and then post to try and have someone hired for October 1st. That would give us a couple months to have our new
Right.
people before the old people left.
Well, that, and we have one council meeting in the month of August, and so if we do not act on it, we wouldn't get in front of council until the second week of September, which really then impacts Dustin's recruiting. By the time he gets people on board and gets them trained, he could be headed towards snow season, so
So is this already on the agenda for council later?
No,
it's not for
No.
tonight as well?
no,
So-
just the police positions are.
Okay, so you would, either way, we're not getting to council until the second week of September for approval on this hire.
Yep.
So then, that does buy you some time, because you could bring this back to the next finance meeting, get the numbers, make your decision, and you'd be at council the same night, basically, if you wanted that extra time. Doug? Go
Well,
ahead.
Can't we can approve it tonight? We have a council meeting potentially scheduled for next week. Could we not add this on there?
Could, they were looking for a special session on a development issue.
Right.
So that's possible. And at that point, those numbers could be provided to the council before they make their choice.
I'd move to approve as listed here on the agenda.
Okay, because it's not a final approval anyway. That makes some sense if you could have that ready for next week. They were surveying for quorum for either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. So, okay, so do we have a motion then to approve this early hire? Motion by Denny, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 5, discussion and possible action on approving accepted offer to purchase for 1514 North Second Street and related budget modification. We'll bring Randy up. You'll recall at our last meeting, we did have a closed session item on this. We had talked about acquiring this property. We gave him some direction. This item is posted also for closed session, but we're thinking we're not going to need closed session because the accepted offer amount is the exact amount that you all asked for. So there's what you asked him to negotiate for has been accepted by the seller. Anything else, Randy? Go ahead.
No, that was a great lead-in.
Okay.
So as you remember, our joint meeting last week with the Economic Development Committee, you requested I move forward with negotiations for the purchase of 1514 North Second Street. We offered $73,900 for the purchase of that property. The city has several adjacent lots to it, which really makes it a huge purchase for us, and being able to bring one more, really that house is on an island there, and bring that in for future redevelopment. So with your blessing on the budget modification, we'll move that forward to council tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Randy? Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I drove by there. It looked like the house is vacant, so we're not kicking anyone out.
Correct. The house has been vacant. We took a tour of it. It's vacant.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion then to approve the acceptance of the offer? Motion by Watson. Is there a second by Denny? Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That moves forward as well. That was all we had on our agenda for tonight, so I'll take a motion to adjourn. We'll have a little gap in between meetings, and we have a real quick public health and safety starting at 6:15 in this chamber before council. So, motion to adjourn? Motion by Lukens, second by Watson. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one's ever opposed to adjournment. So we'll stand adjourned then, and we'll convene public health and safety for 6:15. Thank
That
you.
worked out well.